Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. The title of today's message is Call It What It Is, Modern Dating is Prostitution. And I'm going to establish a core thesis first. The decay of the modern social fabric is driven by a fundamental shift in female identity, where the honorable, service-oriented role of the traditional lady has been discarded in favor of a transactional, self-centered existence that mirrors the behavior of a prostitute. While a true lady finds her purpose in the preservation of the family line, the mastery of domestic virtues, and a respectful submission to her husband, the modern woman has become a predator of resources, pimping out men for financial gain and standards while offering zero reciprocity, moral character, or interest in the sacred duties of wifehood and motherhood. Consequently, the contemporary dating landscape is no longer a search for partnership, but a wicked market of extraction, necessitating a total rejection of modern feminine standards in order to protect the sanctity of marriage and the future of the godly family. Now, the reason why I say in the first sentence that this modern social fabric of dating is prostitution is driven by a fundamental shift in female identity is because women control the dynamics of dating. Understand, ladies, if you're watching, if you were to make it pretty clear to any man who even expresses a little bit of interest in you that you're not going to have sex with him, you're not going to talk to him, he's never going to see you half naked unless he marries you, most men would literally run in seven different directions. If men knew that the cost of having sex with a woman, the cost of seeing a woman in a certain way was that he had to literally marry her, most men would realize that they have to become husband material. The cost of having sex is I have to marry this woman. Okay, but what a lot of women are doing is they're not establishing that boundary with men. They're not telling men that if you want to talk to me, you have to marry me first. They're not telling men if you want to have sex with me, you have to put a wedding ring on my finger first. Instead, what they're doing is saying, well, if you take me out to a nice place to eat, if you buy me a car, if you buy me a bag, I'll let you have sex with me. That is essentially prostitution, because a prostitute exchanges certain services in exchange for resources. It's no different when a woman is essentially letting a man sleep with her in exchange for a car or for a bag. Women control this dynamic. If all women literally, again, made it very clear to men, you're not going to look at me, you're not going to touch me, you're never going to even see my private Instagram unless you intend on marrying me, most men would actually get their act together. Okay, so if a man were trying to trick on a woman, hey mamacita, I want to talk to you, she's gonna let this man know, hey look, here's the deal, you have to marry me first, otherwise get out of my face. But women aren't doing this. Women aren't doing this. You know, for the right bag, for the right car, for the right vacation, they'll let men have their way with them. And this is essentially what prostitution is. And so I'm going to talk about the modern reality, the transactional shift. Modern interactions often mimic a client-prostitute relationship based on resource exchange. Okay, it's extraction over contribution, seeking standards such as money, bags, dates, while and oftentimes offering zero reciprocity. And so when you see a lot of women say things like, I have standards, he's not going to take me to Cheesecake Factory, what you're essentially saying is I'm a prostitute and I'm not going to let you sleep with me in exchange for the Cheesecake Factory. I'll let you sleep with me in exchange for Ruth's Chris. That's prostitution, and you're packaging your rhetoric as you having standards when you're essentially a prostitute saying my fee, my entrance fee is a little bit higher than Shake Shack. Okay, and in many cases, some women offer zero reciprocity, right? And so in the case of women who actually might do something with a man in exchange for a nice date or for a nice bag, some women have zero intention of ever letting a man sleep with them, and they're simply exploiting men, pimping men, right? So she's sort of leading him on, like buy me a bag, get me a car, and I might let you hit. But she has absolutely no intention of ever letting that man do anything to her. And at that point, that's just like pimping. That's basically what it is. And so the resulting frustration that arises from this is women who often treat men as resources will then complain about a lack of good men, again, while providing, in many cases, zero reciprocity or zero value. And even if they are providing, sexual services or whatever in exchange for these so-called standards, men that are good see that as a prostitute. And so why would a quote unquote good man marry a woman who has a track record of simply exchanging her sacred body for a bag, for a car? That by definition is what a prostitute does. And so women who often use men as resources actually scare away the good men, because a good man's not going to marry a woman who, again, by her actions, is a prostitute. Next, I'm going to talk about the deception of dating, the linguistic shift. Dating is a modern invention that emerged at the turn of the 20th century. Prior to this, the concept did not exist in the human vocabulary, right? This is why you don't read Shakespeare and see the word date. Even if you read the Bible, you don't see the word date, okay? Because it wasn't a thing, okay? Dating is a code for moral decay. In reality, dating serves as a euphemism or code name for behavior traditionally associated with whores, interactions stripped of covenant and commitment, which leads to the death of intentionality. Historically, men spoke to women with a clear objective. If time was being spent, both parties understood it was for the sake of marriage and marriage alone. The only valid delay, in the past, the only reason to wait was financial necessity, saving for the wedding, not testing the waters. And so an example of this would be maybe a man who is a soldier during World War II, and he's waiting to get his G.I. Joe bill approved so that he can afford to buy a house. And that's the reason why he's putting off the wedding. Whereas in the modern dating landscape, people have enough money to get married. They have the house, they have the car, but they're simply testing the waters. They want to see if this is really the person they want to marry. But the reality is that the very fact that you entered into this dating, or, if you want to call it that, prostitution, without the clear understanding that you genuinely are going to marry this person, it makes the entire concept of dating very, very vain. Because what do you mean that you don't see this person as your future spouse? What do you mean you don't see this person as the future mother or father of your children? But again, going back to, sexual services for resources, you were really only talking to this person because you thought that in exchange for sleeping with them, you could get a bag. And so the modern trap is that people use dating to delay commitment indefinitely. I see people say, I've been dating this person for 10, 15 years. And that's not an exaggeration. I actually have seen people say this. If you are entertaining a woman, I'm talking to the men here. If you are entertaining a woman without the immediate goal of marriage, you are participating in a system of high-level prostitution. The bottom line is that if there is no commitment to marry, it isn't a relationship, it's resource extraction. Prostitution is at an all-time high, hidden behind the mask of dating. And this is why I personally deleted all of these dating apps off of my phone, because I used to think there was nothing wrong with it, but then I realized, and this also applies to men, is that we'll post certain pictures, right after we went to the gym, when we're cutting and all of these different things, and we're essentially selling ourselves. Here's a picture of me with my biceps showing, or a woman, here's a picture of me with my butt showing. You're literally selling yourself in the hopes that somebody will like you for what you look like. And it's very akin to a prostitute on the street who's wearing a skimpy dress so that you can look at her and lust after her. Right? Again, I want to reiterate here. If you are entertaining a woman, or if you're a woman, if you're entertaining a man without the immediate goal of marriage, if you're not even thinking, if marriage isn't the word that's blaring in your mind when you're entertaining or talking to this individual, you are participating in a system of high-level prostitution. Because if you're not genuinely considering marrying the individual, this tends to be a very binary thing. You're either thinking about marrying the individual, or you're thinking about resource extraction. You're simply thinking about how many followers can you get if you soft launch the relationship? What kind of car can I get if I sleep with him? That's prostitution. That's what it is. Which leads me to the restoration of courtship, the intentional path. Courtship is not a trial run. It is a formal, supervised process with one singular, non-negotiable goal: marriage. The historical precedence of this was that, again, prior to the 1920s, so literally turn of the 20th century, that's when dating became a thing. But prior to that, dating was non-existent. Men participated in calling or visiting a lady at her family home. Time spent together was never casual. If a man and a woman were seen together repeatedly, a covenant was expected. Now, this leads me to the logic of intentionality. No getting to know you for sport. Men should only entertain a woman they have already vetted for character and suitability. So men, in the modern era, if you see a girl, you should be thinking to yourself, am I going to marry her? What you do is that you then vet her. You pay attention to what she posts, what she reposts, what she likes on social media. If you have a conversation with her, pay attention to what she talks about. Pay attention to the way that she dresses. Pay attention to the music that she listens to. Watch her friends, because her friends will give you a first inside look into her values. Okay, you need to vet her for character and suitability. The timing. The only legitimate reason to delay the wedding was the physical or financial inability to host it. Never a lack of certainty about the person. And so I understand if you're putting off the wedding because you want to graduate first so that you can get your full-time job. That's understandable. You're putting off the wedding maybe because once you start your full-time job, you'll get a nice bonus so that you can afford to buy a wedding ring. It was always something physical or financial. It never was, I have everything in place financially, but I'm just not sure if this is the person. If you're that uncertain about the individual, that's an immediate red flag, because the relationship should never have proceeded that far to the point where you had everything set in place, but the only thing holding you back from tying the knot was uncertainty about the person, not uncertainty about your financial situation or uncertainty about other things that have nothing to do with the character of the individual. Okay, which leads me to commitment before intimacy. In the dating world, intimacy is used to define commitment. So I'm going to sleep with this person to see how good they are in bed. No, in courtship, commitment, the intent to marry, is the prerequisite for even beginning the interaction. Again, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to get to know you in an intimate way. Okay, none of that even takes place. And I need to reword that. Fornication is not allowed, right? So you only know someone intimately in that regard after you have been married. Okay, but when it comes to speaking to an individual, taking someone out on a nice place to eat some food, to maybe have a conversation, not to extract resources from the individual, all of that is premeditated. The prerequisite to all of that is an intent to marry, a commitment to marry the individual, which leads to a shield against deception. Courtship removes the whorish element of modern dating by requiring transparency with not only the woman, but the family of the woman, and a public declaration of honorable intent. And so what I've seen a lot of men do who actually are thinking of marrying a woman, and this might sound a little extreme, but I saw one guy, he went to her family and said, I'm going to give her an allowance of my own money, because this is what it would realistically look like if we were to get married. We would have, a budget in which there's a certain amount of money that she can spend for herself. Like, this is family budgeting or couple budgeting. And so he was basically laying the groundwork for marriage, saying this is why I'm even speaking to your daughter in the first place. And so I want to let you know that I have the means and the resources to take care of her as my wife. That was a very honorable thing to do. Something else that I've seen some other couples do that are courting with the intent to marry is they'll go on a fast. Like, they'll go on a 3-day fast, maybe 12 to 16 hours a day, where they're just drinking water and praying, reading certain Bible verses like 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, right? Make my path straight, stuff like that. And just so that they both unilaterally have confirmation from God by way of fasting and prayer that this is the right move, this is the right direction. Okay, this often serves as a shield against deception when it comes to, oh, I don't know if this is the person or not. Next, I'm going to talk about defining the lady, the traditional standard, marriage and intimacy as a means for childbearing and family continuity. So let's talk about the pillar of the home, dedication to being a supportive wife, mastery of domestic responsibilities such as cooking, cleaning, but also not limited to just cooking, cleaning, but also praying, worshiping, teaching, wisdom, right? These are some of the domestic responsibilities that the lady not only was good at, but that she excelled at. Okay, because even if you read Proverbs 31, it says that a woman who is categorized as a Proverbs 31 woman, her husband trusts in her. It actually says that she is strong. It says that she does not eat of idleness. So she's waking up early and she's standing on business. Again, mastery of domestic responsibilities. And lastly, respect for the husband's role. A lady never challenged her husband's authority. She never tried to subvert the godly authority that her husband has, but rather she respects her husband's authority by walking in submission to her husband as it is written. And the demeanor of this type of lady was characterized by dignity, honor, and a sweet, hard-working spirit. And I really want to emphasize the last part, hard-working. Okay, a lady is not simply someone who is gentle and kind and respectful, but then she's also lazy and expects her husband to literally do everything. According to Proverbs 31, this type of lady is very hardworking. She's very diligent. She's very prudent. Her works speak for itself. Okay, so that's a major characteristic when it comes to evaluating the demeanor of the lady. Now, when it comes to the modern woman, however, let's talk about the resource extraction model. So you'll often see three things: self-centered motives. When it comes to modern women, there is a primary interest. Okay, the primary interest is in what resources can be extracted from a man. Again, it goes back to resource extraction. Okay, what type of car can I get if I sleep with this man? What type of date what type of vacation will I go on if I let this man into my house? What type of bag can I get? And it's purely self-centered motives. It has nothing to do with being a wife. It has nothing to do with being a mom. It has nothing to do with mastering and excelling in domestic responsibilities. It's simply about what type of materialistic item can I get in exchange for sleeping with a man. Again, prostitution. Secondly, you'll see a rejection of duty. And I spoke about this a little bit a few seconds ago. Little to no interest in motherhood or the skills required to maintain a household. Because understand, a prostitute has absolutely no intention of having a child with her client. Now, sometimes that happens, but generally speaking, that's not the case. She has no interest in becoming a mother to her client, like in terms of having a child with her client. She has absolutely no intention of marrying her client. She's only doing the certain services with her client in exchange for resources. That's it. So oftentimes you'll see this with modern women. They will proudly and vocally express how they don't know how to cook or clean. They don't know how to submit. They have no respect for men. They don't want to have children, but yet they want a man to marry them. And in reality, it's, I'm going to let you sleep with me as long as you buy me bags and buy me a Mercedes and take me out to a nice vacation spot a few times a year. It's prostitution. And lastly, you'll see a lack of submission, a refusal to be respectful or recognize the structure of a healthy child-rearing relationship. And the reason why I end this last bullet point or this last principle with child-rearing is that that's the principal foundation, in my opinion, of why God established marriage. It wasn't just have sex just to have sex. It was the first commandment in the book of Genesis, right? Reproduce, repopulate the earth, be fruitful and multiply. And so in many cases, modern women, they have no interest in having a child. I understand if you can't have a child. There were many women in the Bible who were barren for decades, okay, including the mother of John the Baptist and the mother of Isaac, okay, even the mother of Joseph. Okay, so it's not a bad thing if a woman cannot have children, but when a woman is able to have children, but she's having a refusal to have children, that's a major problem. And oftentimes that is because it leads back to a rejection of duty. She has no interest in becoming a mother. She has no interest in being a mom. She doesn't want that. She simply wants the resources that she's able to extract by way of being a prostitute, by sleeping with a man. Next, I'm going to talk about the divide in morality. So when it comes to a lady, and the reason why I'm using the word lady and then the word prostitute is that historically, you as a woman only fell into two categories. You were either a lady or you were a prostitute. Modern women today act and think and look like a prostitute, but yet they want to be categorized as a lady simply because they have a wedding ring on their finger. No, for it is also written in the Bible that ye shall know them by their fruits. Okay, your identity is contingent upon your activity as a human being. And so you cannot call yourself a lady while definitively doing things that prostitutes do and then expect to not be identified as anything other than a prostitute. And so when you look at the traditional attributes or actions of a lady, you would see virginity and modesty. And the first one was almost non-negotiable. Okay, in fact, there was actually a time in European history where if a woman, let's say, had enemies, a major way to discredit her was to spread a rumor that she was no longer a virgin. And sometimes this would actually result in financial ruin for her, because no man would, especially if she came from an established family, like no other prince or duke or noble or royal for that matter would ever even consider marrying a so-called lady that had already slept with a man. Like that was a deal breaker. Right, and so virginity and modesty, the lady always dressed with dignity and respect, and she was almost always a virgin. Even in Ecclesiastes 8 verse 6, I believe it says that there was a time when there were virgins without number. This was a standard for thousands of years. If you were a lady, you were a virgin. Secondly, you would have godliness and quiet respect. The lady was godly, not by simply identifying as a woman of God, as a lot of modern women do without having any of the fruit to back it up, but her conduct was godly. She wasn't a liar. She was generous. She was kind. She was gentle. She literally bore the fruit of the Spirit. And so by way of her fruit, which is how you shall know an individual, she could be categorized as godly. And this also leads into the quiet respect. She was quiet and respectful, not because she identified as quiet and respectful, but because rather, when you would speak to her, she had a very quiet spirit. She had a very respectful spirit. And lastly, the lady sought to serve the family unit. She understood that her primary role as a wife was to help the family. It was about the family. It was a very selfless responsibility, which is why in the core thesis I refer to motherhood and wifehood as sacred. She understood, I have to serve my husband, I have to serve my children, I have to be a good wife and a good mother. This is what the lady already knew instinctually. But the modern women, or the modern attributes, is dressing for attention rather than dignity. So these are women that are posting pictures in bikinis and thongs and thinking nothing of it, when in reality they're dressing for the attention primarily of men, even though many of them live in denial and they say things like, oh, I'm posting a picture with literally a couple of strings on my body and it's for the girls. Like, no, that's for men, and you know that. Secondly is a willingness to lie, cheat, and trade up for a wealthier partner. So again, going back to extraction for resources, many women are willing to lie, cheat, and even just discard and trade their partner, or really the person they're pimping, for someone who's wealthier. And this is oftentimes normalized in our society. And lastly, you will see a repulsion towards traditional domestic values. This idea of cooking and cleaning for a man, absolutely not. Would I cook and clean for a man at a job? Oh, absolutely. But for a man that's my husband, that's the father of my children, absolutely not. And they'll have this like repulsion towards traditional domestic values. And the reason why I bring up the workplace environment is that oftentimes the repulsion isn't the actual domestic value itself. It's not that they're against cooking and cleaning. It's that they're against cooking and cleaning for their husband. They have no problem cooking and cleaning if they are working for somebody else and getting paid as a result. Right? They have no issue with that. I've seen women who, again, are dating an athlete and they'll have no problem folding his clothes and doing his laundry because she knows that in the end, she might get a Birkin bag or something. So she has no problem doing these things under the guise of being a prostitute or being a wage slave or an employee. But let it be her husband, let it be the father of her children, absolutely not. Next, I'm going to talk about the wicked social landscape, the pimping dynamic. And I'm using this word again, pimp. Okay, modern dating is often viewed as a game of financial exploitation rather than love. Where are all the lover girls at? And even for the men, like where did the love go? It's all about financial exploitation. What can I gain? What can I extract? It's extremely parasitic, which leads me to replaceability. Men are often treated as replaceable commodities based on their bank accounts. I see women today bragging about their roster. You're a whore. You're a prostitute bragging about how many clients you have. That's nothing that you should be proud of. You should actually be ashamed. Okay, but this replaceability, this idea of viewing a human being as simply a commodity based on how much money they have in their bank account is normalized in our culture. And lastly, the modern landscape is wicked, okay, because of necessitating a strict refusal to marry those who do not uphold the standards of a lady. Okay, and what I mean by this is that because of the modern dating landscape, okay, it makes it necessary for men in particular to have a strict refusal to marry those who do not uphold the standards of a lady. And so if I see a woman who's entertaining any man who will simply give her attention, if I see a woman who's dressing like a prostitute, if I see a woman who is bragging about how many men she has on her roster, when in reality she's a prostitute bragging about how many clients she has, it creates a precedent in which I have to strictly refuse to marry those women because they do not uphold the standards of a lady. Okay, and lastly, the choice, right? As a lady or a woman rather, you really have two choices. Choice A is a life of service and family versus a life of extraction and self-interest. Okay, you really only fall into two camps. You're either serving the interests of your family, meaning your husband and your children. That is first. First it's God, but then second is your family. Or the other option, in many cases, this second option doesn't even involve God for a lot of women, but it's simply a matter of self-interest, extraction. What can I get for myself? And so the call to action here is recognizing the reality of modern behavior to protect one's future and legacy. Men and women as well, you cannot be ignorant of Satan's devices. You have to recognize the reality of our modern culture and protect yourself. You don't want to be the man who is naive and then you end up marrying a whore. This also applies for women because everything that I said, a lot of men have this mentality. There are some men who are tricking women into giving them her entire paycheck so he can buy a game or something, right? You need to protect yourself. Now, don't lie to yourself because that's almost like one of the stupidest things you can do. They don't pretend that just because someone, I don't know, went to a football tailgate that they're a whore. Like, don't lie to, don't think that, oh, because they posted a selfie that they're trying to get the attention of people. Like, actually be realistic, use some discernment and see whether or not that this person is really being a prostitute or maybe they just have self-confidence and you don't, right? So don't just start name calling people when you don't really have all the facts. But do try as best as you can to recognize the reality of modern behavior in our modern dating, if you even want to call it that, culture, to protect yourself, your future, and your legacy. If you enjoyed this video, please do feel free to subscribe, like, and comment, and I will see you in the next one.